a team of individuals up here. Russell Anderson will introduce them. I'll explain what's going on in just a sec. John Searle is just a wee bit under the weather right now, and we're hoping to get him in via Skype the last 15 minutes, which would be wonderful for us to be able to have his presence here. If we can't do that, everybody else on his team that's working with them is here. So I just want to let you know that's what's supposed to happen, but it won't happen until the last few minutes of the presentation. Are we about mic'd up over there? Looks like it, okay. So this lecture is going to deal with the history and practicality of anti-gravity propulsion devices and systems, which have been around for decades. What this means is artificial gravity, or electromagnetic propulsion. Through the magic of Skype, if we're lucky, we will have John Searle with us today. We're also going to have Jason Verbelli here. I think he's out of breath. He just ran over here in his alligator shoes from the other room after introducing someone. And they're going to take us on a little trip through time with the works of Nikola Tesla, Thomas Townsend Brown, and the Searle effect generator, the extension of this being propulsion in space. So once he's ready to roll here, he's having a little private conversation with the team. They're working it out. Okay, you got the handshake, you got the nod. Okay, let's welcome Russell Anderson and his teammates, including Jason Verbelli, part of the SEARL team.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Russell Anderson. I've been working with Professor John Searle for the past 6 years, and right now I'd like to call all the members of Team SEARL who are up here, who are here today. Mr. Bradley Lockerman, Jason Verbelli works at SEARL Magnetics in San Diego also. I'll be going there soon to work full-time in another month. Here's Mr. Bradley Lockerman. I'd like to get Mr. Sam Mason, without whose help this presentation would not be possible. Sam, amazing. I'd like to get, if Mr. Craig Ricketts is here. Craig, are you here?
Yep.
Mr. Craig Ricketts. Is Fernando Morris here?
Yep.
One of our chief engineers. We are Team SEARL. We're all under the banner of SEARL Technologies, or STI. Is Mike Windle here? Mike Windle is a very important part of SEARL Technologies, and we are determined individuals working under Professor John Searle, and as determined individuals, we are going to get results. We are getting results, and this is our best year ever. And if we could all join hands. Power to the people. This technology is here now, today, and it's very low tech. It's very low tech, and we can have this. And without further ado, I'll get started with the presentation. Thanks, guys. And girl. Thank you. Well, let's see. The idea of anti-gravity, which is really artificial gravity. Anti-gravity is a very, very poor nomenclature. Anti implies you're destroying something. We're not destroying gravity. We are just accessing artificial gravity. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, both special and general, which has some holes, but it also has some very good points. You can either access gravity with a very large localized concentration of mass, or a very large localized concentration of energy. And for artificial gravity, we're obviously going to use a very large localized concentration of electromagnetic energy. Now, see if this clicker will work. That's me. The title is Artificial Gravity, which is Electromagnetic Propulsion. That's me, Russell Anderson, CEO of SEARL Aerospace. In another month, I'll be San Diego working full-time on the SEG, the SEARL effect generator, by Professor John R.R. Searle, who's our boss in England. He's a fantastic gentleman, nicest gentleman you'd ever want to meet, smartest gentleman, and he's got quite a head on his shoulders. Now, that's the proud logo, the swallow. Seek with all learning, love overrules war. That's our motto. That's our motto. With this technology, we can bring people together. There will be no more wars for oil. And we can have a cheap, safe, low-cost, and very efficient space program utilizing the electrogravitic technology of Professor John Searle and the ancillary technologies of people like Thomas Townsend Brown. Now, that's me in the upper left-hand corner back in the year 2000 with a couple of Biefeld-Brown discs that are 1 meter diameter that I built way back in the 1990s, and got working with a power supply, high voltage, low amperage power supply that I built from a kit. And there's the one of the discoverers of electrogravity, one of the fathers of electrogravity, along with Mr. Nikola Tesla, Dr. Tesla, Thomas Townsend Brown, holding about a 1 meter diameter, one of his famous flying saucers, which I replicated right from the patent. It's very, very powerful. In fact, it is overunity because more force is created in these devices than is input in electrical energy. Way more force. This should be taught in our schools, but I've been helping to rectify that oversight, whether deliberate or accidental, by being in schools since the year 2002, teaching kids how to win science fairs with electrogravitic technology. Now, that's the discs that you saw at a demonstration. That was at the second anti-gravity conference held by Mr. Jim Cox of Anti-Gravity and Space Drive News in downtown Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Library. This was June 24th of the year 2000, so this about almost 13 and a half years ago. And those are just being powered, going around the maypole that just copied right from the patent. That's a custom designed tower and rotor apparatus that I built. They get up and move, from a standing start. As soon as you hit the variac, hit the switch, they're off and going. And we did an experiment also where later on in the presentation we sealed them up in plastic bags, and they still rotated, but they rotated backwards, which is really odd because we didn't reduce polarity, or reverse polarity, I'm sorry. But these produce a weird field that ionizes everything around it in an 80-foot radius. Everything will get ionized, even body tissue. So you go touch someone who's not ionized yet, you get a spark that equalizes the potentials. Obviously, when I was a lot better shape, maybe with some electrogravitics I'll get back into shape. But anyway, yeah, that was the presentation back in the year 2000. Try to go faster because I know we don't have a whole heck of a lot of time. But a lot of people say, well, patents don't work. You can't trust that. In my experience, patents work very well indeed. You just got to get off your butt and build them. And we are building this and flying these. And these are just for horizontal propulsion. But you can stop by our SEG, SEARL, STI booth, SMI, STI, SAC booths, and see the levitating flying version of that, which uses a little less power for safety. You do not want to touch these. These are flying capacitors, so even after they're de-energized, they still hold on to a little bit of charge. And that's my lab partner for 26 years, David Rossignoli, who has worked at Lockheed Martin since he got out of college. And I guess that's about 18 years ago. So what he's doing is that rod has a wire on it. It's connected to the main ground of the building to discharge them. So I can touch them safely, to put plastic bags around them to test for ion wind. We could never feel even the slightest breeze from these things, but yet they get up and move. And Townsend Brown, Thomas Townsend Brown, did some very important vacuum chamber work in Hawaii, in Paris, France in 1955. saw that they worked more efficiently in vacuum, and the efficiency was so great that in November of 1955, the U.S. Air Force classified the entire subject. And that explains why it's not taught in schools, but it's very fundamental. So electrogravitics is lift and propulsion without aerodynamics or internal combustion. No fuel, no moving parts, no pollution. Sounds like what we all want. Now, these are some government aerodynes. Some of them are electrogravitic, some of them are aerodynamic. Got some various, the molar craft, he's been trying to get that off and running for a couple of decades now at least. And there's some larger aerodynes. The one in the bottom center is an interesting lenticular French aerodyne. Looks like something right out of science fiction you see on an Irwin Allen TV show. Well, essentially it is. And there's the Avro car on the bottom right. And despite some very promising results, that was dropped as a project around the year I was born, 1961. But it's based on some very, very important aerodyne work done by German scientists, Italian scientists, Bolonzo, Schriever, Habermohl, Schauberger. And I've always been fascinated by unconventional flying objects for obvious reasons. And there are various, the lenticular reentry vehicle, LRV, the EKIP, the molar craft, Locomo Sky Thermoplan, Cousinet, RC-360, the French craft in the bottom center, and the Avro car. Now, on the upper left-hand corner, we have the repulsine, which takes advantage of both the Coanda effect and the tornado principle, tornado power effect that was noticed and built and amplified, this systems found in nature, by Austrian scientist Victor Schauberger. Very important work. He built this, which levitates with unbelievable force. A lot of that force, most of the force, seems to be electrical in nature. That's very important. When you rotate air or water into a spinning motion called, which he called a colloidal, there's a strong electrical gradient present. That's very important. And then top middle is the OTC X1 from Otis T. Carr. Ralph Ring, who was at last year's conference in Holland, talks about that because he worked on that and flew inside one of the manned craft. This is obviously a model. Also an electrovitic craft with a rotor and accumulator inside called a Utron. Very important electrogravitics. And now, on the right side, you see something very, very important to both the SEARL effect at high voltage and the Biefeld-Brown effect at high voltage. What you see up there, I don't know if this has a laser. Is there a laser in it? No, I guess not. What you see is a mica disc, very high K-factor dielectric, a thin mica disc that's mobile on a point. Now, what you see on either side are balls of a Wimshurst generator or some similar high voltage electrostatic generator. As soon as the generator is activated, the mica disc assumes a very, very rapid rotation and off it goes. Very important. This should be taught in our schools, in our institutions of learning. It's not. Oh, I forgot to mention, on the bottom left also is a device by Sam Mason? Sam Mason here? I guess not. But anyway, that device is from Mark Tamian. And that was built by copying Professor Searle's technology. Now, Professor Searle's inverse gravity vehicle, which used to be called a levity disc back in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, that produces intense cold. By contrast, the Mark Tamian device produces heat, tremendous heat. And those lines are electromagnetic lines of force. There are about 2 or 3 different kinds of rotating fields, a magnetostatic field, a rotating magnetic field, and an electrostatic field. The periphery on these devices is always going to be negative. Electrical charges want to escape from sharp points, and adhere to smooth, curved, large surface areas. That's what you want in this form of propulsion. Oh, and the bottom center, I believe that is a NASA concept for a warp drive craft. Electrogravitics is warp drive, whether below the speed of light or above the speed of light. Since these devices are force field propelled, every atom of ship and payload within the field moves at the same rate. There's no freight cars effect, as if you have a point of force coming from somewhere. Every atom of ship and payload moves at the same rate. So you have canceled inertial mass. Gravitational mass is still there, but since they have no inertia, the speed of light is no longer a barrier. It's very important. Now, what you have here is a fish in a river, in a moving current. The fish is able to remain motionless because of its shape and also the way water wants to move in a vortexian action around the fish and the design of the fish's body. Electrogravitic craft copy the design of the fish. Very important. Now, this is one of my craft, which I call beam ships, from my company that I've run since 1999, called Applied Electrogravitics. And that's Beam Ship Variation 1 on the left-hand side. And that is award-winning. It won the Detroit, 10 years ago, the Detroit Metro Science Fair for 3 Dearborn, Michigan high school students who flew me up to Dearborn, Michigan after they bought one of my craft and micro power supplies so that I could supervise their work. And they won the Detroit Metro Science Fair grand prize in physics with the Beam Ship Variation 1. So that design is award-winning, but the patent is, of course, Thomas Townsend Brown's electrokinetic apparatus. That's patent number 2949550. Very important patent. And on to the right of that is one of my beam ships that Sam Mason built and modified a little bit, and that's Beam Ship Variation 5, the 5-footer. That's my messy apartment in O2. The larger you make them, the more force they have. That's one of the tenets of the Biefeld-Brown effect. They just really get up and move with hardly any voltage at all. We make them lightweight for safety. Don't want to shock the life out of anyone. And there I am on the left-hand side there. Mr. John Cornett with the hat is helping me finish 1-to-1 scale model of Professor SEARL's levity disk, which today we call an inverse gravity vehicle, and that is same size as the P-series craft, which are about 10-foot, 11-foot diameter. And it shows the inner track is where the SEG housing normally is. Outside of it is the flight cell area. Flight cells control the flight angle and also the speed of the SEG. There's a load cell inside each flight cell. And the whole idea of the inverse gravity vehicle disk body, it's a flight frame for control. The device at the bottom, the SEG, is what flies. It wasn't meant to fly. It was just supposed to be a unique electrical generator that Professor John Searle, when he was only 14 years old, working as an electrical apprentice, had the idea, which came from a series of 2 oddly repeating dreams from age 4 to age 10. I guess that was late 1930s, early 1940s, that he had, that told him the law of the squares, which is a mathematical system which is basically a kind of a computer. And it's very interesting because if you follow that law, you can build this device which taps the zero-point energy, coheres the random zero-point energy, and that energy potential is just unbelievable. 1 cubic meter of it or less can boil off all our oceans. It's, way more power than you could ever imagine. And there are some IGVs of various sizes flying in and around the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Beautiful city. And IGV prototypes coming soon. With funding and hard work, anything is possible. And there I am with standing in front of an IGV drawing that I believe J.P. Roos did in 1970, a Starship Ezekiel. It's a 90-foot craft, a 4 to 5-seater craft. And I'm holding a craft that's pretty much based on that exact same profile, C-57D Starship from the movie Forbidden Planet. Anyway, Professor Searle, he's just an amazing man. He's my friend, he's my boss, and I hope everyone here gets to meet him in due time. We were in China at the end of August 2013. We have a new affiliate group, a subsidiary, SEARL Energy Group China. And we're at the 4th Global Green Energy Prosperity Forum in Beijing, China. And we're demonstrating the SEARL effect with the mock-up and our eddy current demonstrator. Some wonderful people in China that just did us proud. And some very important people in the field. John Searle, Professor John Searle, his invention, the SEG. It was not supposed to be a flying machine, but up it goes. Nothing can hold it down. It's physically impossible. There's negative charge coming off the rim, positive charge in the center. The Earth has a very powerful negative charge at its surface. So you can see if you match that charge, it will be physically impossible to hold it down. John Searle, as a young child, who started having those dreams. Albert Einstein as a young man. Nikola Tesla, who gave us almost single-handedly our entire electrical 20th century. And some photos of one of the P-series craft, I believe is the P-11, about 10-foot diameter. The whole idea of the craft is a flight frame for control. And they were controlled with 12-meter band ham radio, very powerful. 64, 65 channels of radio control. And bottom left-hand corner is some work back in the 60s with some scale models. Top side of the P-11, some newspaper articles, a lot of press coverage, huge amount of press coverage back in the 60s and 70s. And bottom right is one of the control panels and signal generators used for the craft. SEARL National Space Research Consortium, or SNSRC. And there's a little bit about the law of the squares. The law of the squares tells you what elements to use in what proportions, depending on what volume of space you want to fill with SEARL Effect Generator, or SEG. The name SEG, or SEARL Effect Generator, came from Dr. Shinichi Seiki, who was involved at that time in the early 70s, late 60s. In 1972, he wrote the principles of ultra-relativity, the principles of ultra-relativity that explain the operation of this craft, where conventional science was stymied in its explanation of the craft. The craft, the SEG and the craft obey all the laws of physics as taught. There are no physical laws being broken. It's just a deeper understanding and utilization of physics. The law of the squares is based on supersymmetry. Like light, magnetism is broken down to its spectrum components, you see upper right-hand corner, then utilized to generate a resonant magnetic wave. A resonant magnetic wave. We'll see that again and again. That's very, very important to understand what's going on. Now you see the squares. 2 times 2 is 4. Everything is on this technology is based on 2 squared. Well, 2 squared is 4. So you have 4 horizontals and 4 verticals. If you have the numbers in the square sequential, you get random outputs from the horizontals, the verticals, and the diagonals. But if you randomize the numbers, you get uniform outputs from the horizontals, diagonals, and verticals. That's a mathematical representation of what the SEG does. It converts the random energy, which is staggering potential, into coherent electrical force and torque and motion. Very important. Now, this is the basic structure of the SEG. Inner layer is the collector of electrons. That's positive. Electrons want to seek out a positive source. They can't help it. It's just basic physics. Opposites attract. So electrons are sucked in a vortexian action, even when there's no relative movement. You put probes on the inner layer and the outer layer, you'll get a potential, even when there's no movement at all. Rotation enhances that effect markedly. So you get a positive layer on the inside. Rare earths like neodymium have lots of, or not lots, a couple extra electrons on their valence shells, their atomic shells, their outer 4f and 5f band shells. And those are very mobile. And rare earths like neodymium greedily suck up and readily emit those electrons. Then you have a gating layer of a plastic material to act as an insulator. Then you have an electron accelerator that's magnetized with the Coca-Cola formula, which is basically a linear motor. This is a linear motor, of which there are several out there. Look on YouTube, you can find them. And we have an outer layer which has to be paramagnetic, so you get no friction when you start getting the rotation. Now, what you have is two fields at right angles. You have a field at x-axis on the stator, which is the ring, and a field at y-axis on the roller or runner. You get two fields printed with sinusoidal currents at right angles. They're 90 degrees out of phase. That's a two-phase motor. Those rollers can't help but start rotating around. You got to have two fields at right angles or it won't work. They orbit and rotate. And of course, the copper conductor layer has to be conductive, but paramagnetic. So you get eddy currents that cause the rollers to be repelled. So you get a balance of forces between the attraction of the iron layer and the stator and the roller, attraction, and linear motoring, and repulsion of the eddy currents. And we have an eddy current demonstrator with us, of course. Many of you have already seen that. Highly recommend stop by one of our booths and check it out. So what you have in the red, the bottom center, is a rotating magnetic wave when those two fields, the field on the stator and the field on the rotor, are combined, which acts like an Archimedes water screw. It's a rotating magnetic field. So you have two sinusoidal waves at right angles. They're 90 degrees out of phase. See how they intersect at zero line? That's why you get motion. That's motion of a magnetic field, a rotating magnetic field. Well, Nikola Tesla, when he was a young child, got the idea of the rotating magnetic field, and that gave us polyphase AC, our entire electrical 20th century. And there's the mock-up on the bench and on the scope. You can see the sinusoidal current. There's a SEARL effect generator. The original name was something very ungainly, gyro, flywheel, ball race device, high energy density magnetic device. Shinichi Seiki said, why not just call it the SEARL effect generator, or SEG for an acronym? And the name stuck. Now, there's a 3-ring generator. All you need is just one to demonstrate the concept. One plate, plate number 1, the innermost one, and one runner. Ideally, you need 12 runners on the inner plate. And you have coils at the periphery, which generate electricity in the conventional manner by cutting lines of magnetic force. That's all. But you have the added benefit of electron flux radially through the SEG, pumping electrons into the coils. So just like T. Henry Moray's of Salt Lake City's radiant energy accumulator, you get cold currents. You get negative resistance. And negative resistance produces cold. Positive resistance, which is all our current systems of power, produces heat. A negative state is very healthy. We want electrons and negative ions in our environment. They become standard in hospital operating theaters and homes to clean the air. Dirt, dust, and bacteria just drop right out of the air. Again, there's the SEG mock-up. It's the reverse of the actual SEG. The SEG itself is a magnetic prime mover. Of course, reverse that, and you have an electric motor. An electric motor and electric generator are opposites of the same thing. There's SEG, an expanding flux of electricity, negative ions coming off the rim. So the positive is on the innermost layer, the negative polarity is on the outermost layer. The more load you put on the SEG, the faster it will run, and the more power you can get from it. Nominal operating voltage of the SEG is about 100,000 volts at a very low amperage, about maybe 1.5 milliamps. When you get higher and higher voltages, you get a vacuum around the SEG. The higher the voltage, the stronger the vacuum. At anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million volts, no air can come near the SEG. It's just pushed away. And there's a letter from Mr. George Uhlig. Dear Mr. Searle, I have the responsibility for U.S. Air Force propulsion and energy conversion research and development interests in Europe and is presently located in the European Office of Aerospace Research and Development, London, England. One of our Air Force organizations in the United States, I guess other Air Force in the United States, has requested a copy of your report, apparently authored by you, entitled Disc-Shaped Type of Flying Craft. If it is possible to send me a copy of this report at no charge to the government, no charge to the government. Yeah, what's the government doing in Washington doing right now? They're not doing squat. It's a broken system. If it is possible to send me a copy, no charge, I would appreciate it. Or if you prefer, I could copy it and return it to you. Good luck with that. Yeah, right? Either way, we would like to have the opportunity of acquiring this report. So the military would be very derelict if they were not interested in this technology. And they're not derelict. U.S. Air Force, interest in propulsion and energy conversion research. Oh yeah. The SEG is a converter of random electrons. You could think of little pieces of vacuum, as Tom Bearden calls them, as pre-electrons. Those pre-electrons house enormous quantity of harder electrons, which normally surround every atom. The SEG is a converter of that random energy of the ether or 0 point into useful energy. Anyway, Dr. George Uhlig earned his doctorate degree in '72 under Henry Eyring while a career U.S. Air Force officer. George worked on his doctoral research and simultaneously handled projects of greater interest to the Air Force. After retiring from the Air Force in 1983, with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, George was the head of research and development for Hercules Aerospace at the Bacchus Works in Magna, Utah. Dugway Proving Ground is in Utah. Taught college chemistry courses at Salt Lake Community College, then College of Eastern Utah and Price. At CEU, he founded the only science research program at the college and inspired many students to pursue advanced education in the sciences and engineering. Great job if you can get it. George retired from the CEU in 2008, and you can check that out online. Now, if you want to go into space with much less cost, much safer, much faster than any rocket, this is the design that seems to work the best. Very interesting. It's in our zeitgeist. It's in our collective consciousness. I believe at a certain point in a society's development, wherever life exists in the universe, and we're discovering new planets all the time, this type of propulsion will be developed. We developed this type of propulsion decades and decades and decades ago. Low tech, like the A-bomb, low tech. And there's a diagram of a single-seater craft, say a fighter craft, a reconnaissance craft, maybe about 35 feet in diameter. At the edge is a rim discharge pin coming off one of the flight cells right at the flame barrier area. In this type of propulsion, you want to eject electrons from the rim, just like that Ducrochet disc, the mica disc, that starts rotating and then flying off when it's presented with high voltage. Just like that. 64 struts, 64 flight cells or flight control cells, and landing legs. There's one of a model IGV, levity disc, inverse gravity vehicle that was built back in the day. 40 years ago, perhaps. Ah, there's the last craft built. I believe it was on the land of the late Alfred Fleetwood in Berkshire, UK, Berkshire, England. And that craft, Professor Searle said, well, let's put clear shells on it and then run a fine wire grid for the electrical happenings on the underside of it. This is very important. This was 7 meters in diameter, about 21 feet. And this had a really good control system, best flight cells ever. This was taken off and flown around the world and whipped around the speeds far faster than any rocket with no inertia. Of course, for a manned craft, you have to provide a life support system because no air can come near the craft. Flight voltage is around 1 teravolt. Whatever the energy of the craft, the current never exceeds 1.5 milliamperes. High energy electrostatics. High energy electrostatics is identical to a gravitational field. There's your unified field theory. The unifying field is the electrical field because you can create gravity and magnetism. There's some pictures of past work, photographs. Up on top is one of the magnetized segments of a runner or roller. Everything has to be precise. There's Sue Justice in a miniskirt standing on top of the almost completed Demo 1 craft, the 21-footer. And Professor Searle is a young man. It's about 40 years ago, building it in Berkshire. Some of the team of the SEARL National Space Research Consortium, or the SNSRC. No noise, no pollution, no heat, no vibration, no consumption of Earth's oxygen, no need to carry fuel, no runways, no launch pads. Professor Searle says, we are the tomorrow people, the decision makers. You better believe it. Tomorrow's transportation today. Development research by the SEARL National Space Research Consortium UK. And now we're all over the world. We have subsidiaries in Australia, China, all over the place for obvious reasons. In 1968, this was the P-11 craft, planned to develop such a vehicle for commercial use for deep space exploration. There's no limit to the speed, as far as we know, and since there's no inertia, the speed of light shouldn't be a barrier any more than the speed of sound was a barrier to Chuck Yeager and the Bell Aerospace X-1 rocket plane back in October 1947. 67 years ago. First SEGs were built at British Rewinds and Repairs in London in 1946 by the team of engineers there. And there's a P-11 in a field in Warminster. You can go to that field and see where the craft were flown. Mostly flown from Warminster. The P-11 was stored in Archangel, Russia, because there was no place to house it for safety in the UK. 41 of these were built between 1954 to and flown 1954 and 1978. And each new iteration of the craft utilized the same Searle effect generator. Remember, it was not supposed to be a flying machine, just a unique type of electrical power generator. And this craft weighed, without being powered, it weighed about 4.5 tons, 4.5 tons. And the 21-footer was about 12 tons. Some newspaper articles on the work. 1979, 1960s. A lot of interest. Mr. Searle expects to offer day trips to the moon, and he's serious. Oh, yeah. Get to the moon in about an hour or less.
Did you ever beat it?
I wouldn't be surprised. Now, there's the 3D printing. 3D printers are revolutionizing life here on Earth, and they will continue to do so in space. We'll have a 3D printer to make any parts we need on board the flying craft. Food, clothing, organs, splints, replacement parts, and so much more. Every IGV, inverse gravity vehicle, SEARL IGV, will come standard with a 3D printer workstation. You better believe it. Wave of the future. And this is the IGV control mechanism. There is one of the radio controlled power panels that was not mobile. They also had a mobile panel. It was very large, military surplus. If you're conversant with radio frequency and electronics, all this is pretty much second nature to you. And that's the setup at 17 St. Stephen's Close, Mortimer. Some of the equipment you've seen and the TV newsreels. All this was covered by the BBC, BBC One, Southern Television, Anglia. And here are 6 frames taken with a motor drive camera in rapid succession. The P-11 flying in Warminster, England. And that's about 10-foot diameter, same size as a model I built for 3 years ago at the Tesla Symposium in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he's not afraid of that 4.5-ton device falling on him. The Earth just pushes it away. He did demonstrations. There were, hundreds of witnesses. They were usually on Sundays, Sunday afternoon flight demonstrations. He would rush models at the ground. As soon as they got near the ground, they would just curve right up and keep on going to the sound of applause. They rush models at the house. They can't hit anything, can't hit buildings with this. The field just pushes it away. There's a strong repulsion field from the rim that repels the Earth and anything else approaching the rim. Conversely, there's an attraction field at the hub. If the drive is switched on suddenly, it'll take up a chunk of sod. They'll stick to the bottom of the craft. High energy electrostatics. Remember, identical to a gravitational field. At these insane voltages, you get weird things happening. But not weird if you know physics, standard physics. So 6 frames in rapid succession. The BBC has reams of flight footage. In the 1990s, when interest in the work reawakened, they wanted insane amounts of money for the footage. Now, they won't even admit it exists, which insults a lot of people who are my age who remember it. And there's some of the newer team, Professor SEARL, in the late 90s, early 2000s, with some models, standing on top of the not P-11, the Demo 1. The Demo 1 was deliberately built out of wood, the weakest material available, to silence detractors and scientists who said such a structure would never support its own weight. You can make it out of cardboard. Once it's at flight voltage, superconducting, the SEG is superconducting by putting a load on it with the load cells, which is inside each of the 64 flight cells. Once you have that voltage, there are no stresses whatsoever. What you do have at flight voltage inside the center is 1/2 G onboard gravity. So if you weigh 200 pounds on board the craft, when it's energized at flight voltage, you only weigh 100 pounds. And no sensation of motion. Nothing. You don't feel anything. Right angle turns, instant starts and stops, you feel nothing. Plus, no sonic boom. Why no sonic boom? Because of the electrical field. Yeah, Northrop Corporation did experiments with high voltage electrified airfoils, and they found that not only was skin heating eliminated, sonic boom and shock waves are eliminated too. So that's why you fly multi-Mach with this thing, no sonic boom. And there's Starport Earth 1, Professor SEARL, commanding the craft in flight. They are controlled by various ground stations around the world with special code, 12-meter band ham radio. And there's a mock-up that you can see at our booth of the newest ones. It was supposed to go to China, but there just wasn't enough time. So, but we have it here for your viewing pleasure. Just stop by our booth, say hi. Very cool graphic by our team. Ball races develop incredible energy. In the SEG, this energy is also converted into electrical energy. Now, there's been a lot of experiments done by Bruce De Palma of the N machine, homopolar motor, and others, found out why you can get incredible energy right from space. The spin of an object connected to its environment. Its environment is the ether. or universal cosmic energy. We call it zero-point energy in physics today. Staggering amounts of energy all around us, all the time. The inverse gravitational vehicle utilizes gravity technology, gyroscopic technology, flywheel technology, cyclotron technology, electrical technology, magnetic wave technology, and ball race technology, all in one. And this came from a couple of dreams. How strange and wonderful is the universe. And there's a little look at the asymmetrical waveform capacitance. That's part of the effect. 64 struts, 64 flight cells or flight control cells. Ever since there have been people, there have been explorers looking in places where others hadn't been before. Not everyone does it, but we are all part of a species where some members of the species do. They're not idle dreamers. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I grew up with in the Bronx, he tutored me in algebra. We're very good friends, still very good friends today. Reaching for the Stars, America's Choice, Natural History magazine, April 2003, a little over 10.5 years ago. Proposed spacesuit for IGV flight crews. Now, time sweep power unit supply test equipment requirements. Multi-range meter resistance at 20 kiloohms per volt, e.g. an avometer Model 8, oscilloscope, high voltage Mark IIB or equivalent, components to make up the input networks. Components to make up the load for the Mark IIB, a delayed pulse synchronizer type 173/2 or type 192872. Full list of components available at SEARLaerospace.com, and that site also has all the new books and info, and you can really get an education if you go to SEARLaerospace.com. The inverse gravity vehicle utilizes gravity waves found in nature throughout the cosmos. Gravity is a particle and a wave, just like a photon, a wavicle. SEG generates a toroidal electrodynamic field. It generates about 3 or 4 different kinds of fields, a high voltage electrostatic field, a high energy rotating magnetic field, a magnetostatic field, which induces an ordinary magnetic field of like polarity in anything approaching it. So also anything approaching it would be repelled with irresistible force. It's what we call a force field. And this is how space-time is bent. Space-time, thing about space-time that's really great for us is that it's an elastic medium. You can squash it, you can expand it, and you can utilize this effect of space-time to travel anywhere you want in our universe in reasonable time and economy in real time. Go to Alpha Centauri on a 2-month jaunt, come back, your friends and relatives won't be any older than you. Can't get that with ordinary rocket technology, what we call impulse drive. This is warp drive, not impulse rocket drive. Nice little Fibonacci spiral there. Now, here's IGVs at your airport. A lot of people flew in by air. How'd you like to get anywhere on the Earth in 30 minutes or less? You can do it with Professor Searle's technology.
You wouldn't need an airport.
Well, you still need an airport, but you wouldn't have to break the bank of your airline company on ever-rising fuel costs.
No landing strip.
And no pollution. No pollution. No chemtrails. Well, that's a separate issue. But a lot of chemtrails yesterday. Everybody see the chemtrails yesterday? Crazy. As the IGV becomes more commonplace, new IGV spaceports will be needed to optimize air traffic safety. Professor John Searle has outlined plans to create the perfect IGV installation for global transatmospheric transportation. The first IGVs will be unmanned UAVs, and then we will gradually upscale the designs while outfitting with life support systems, because at those voltages, there's no air. The higher the voltage, the stronger the vacuum. And there's that aforementioned single-seater, the inverse gravity vehicle, and the SEG is enlarged greatly for clarity. And there it is with its shells on. And the shells are normally connected to the positive side of the generator. So they're acting like giant aerials to suck in electrons to the innermost neodymium layer of plate number 1. And there's the rib structure, 64 struts, 64 flight cells. Everything's based on 8, the game of hopscotch. Well, 8 squared is 64. Very important. There's the IGV structure with the SEG drive, SEARL effect generator drive unit inside. The SEG is the thing that flies. The IGG is just a flight frame for control. There's the cabin. And there's a seat. Wouldn't need seat belts. There's a workstation on board the manned IGV. There's a toroidal field that you get when you're at flight voltage. Now, there could be a teravolt. There's about a teravolt, 10 to the 12 volts at 1.5 milliamps on the skin of the craft. If you touch that, you're dead. But inside the craft, you're in the eye of the hurricane. You're safe. Voltages and charges want to stick to the outside of an enclosed conductor. You're safe inside. You're in the eye of the hurricane. The SEG can promote sustainable energy generation during terraforming water purification. There's Mons Olympus on Mars, one of the largest volcanoes, and if not largest volcano in the solar system, in our Sol system. It's the flight cells. There's a large, you can make these as large as you want. Flying hotels. Large-scale Ezekiel interior will be customizable to suit various mission parameters and can also act as a permanent orbital research station, complete with ISS docking ports, International Space Station docking ports, at much reduced cost. Professor John Searle, my boss, our boss at Team Searle, STI, Man Who Saved Tomorrow. On the left-hand side, would you like to breathe that air and drink that water? Or would you like the right-hand side? No brainer. Now, here's some animation that one of our team did. I believe it was Chuck Middaugh or Kevin Ballmer. Chuck Middaugh. There's the lower and upper hatches. Egress is obviously through the lower hatch. SEG drive. We'll take a tour inside the craft. There's some screens, 3D and normal screens, some flight stations, workstations. And off we go on the next SEARL IGV mission to explore space or learn more about our Earth. Any speed you want, much faster than any rocket. From VTOL hovering to speeds far faster than any impulse drive rocket. IGV, SEARL Aerospace, Inc. Seek with all learning, love overrules war. Now, we have a little short film, about 12 minutes, 10, 12 minutes. Are we over time?
Right on time, 4:44, man.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll take a look at that, give you a little idea, see the man himself. And he is just an incredible human being. Best boss I will ever have. And he's a great friend, probably my best friend. All our best friends, all of humanity's best friend.
So while that's running up, I heard some stories where Tesla had his little space machines and they kept disappearing and would go off and then disappear with everything in there.
There are rumors.
Yeah. You guys make any of your machines disappear?
Not yet. But anything's possible. Now, we need some audio on this. I don't know if the audio is going to come up. Yeah, there we go. This is a 12-minute excerpt from the John Searle Story DVD, which you can download or purchase from the johnsearlestory.com website. Highly recommend you take a look at that.
An SEG is a device that converts the energy around you, that's everywhere, into useful energy, what we call electricity.
The generator is a magnetic device that is totally magnetic. It is its own prime mover. It will self-start and continue to run, and as far as we know, we can say never stop.
We have something here that needs to be investigated, and really that's my role. I am a technical investigator of the SEG.
The generator is approximately 2 foot in diameter by about 8 inches high, and it can be put in the home to power your home. It can be put in your automobile to power your automobile.
The British government said they know about it, but they think it's a novelty.
Many of the third world countries have no means of generating electricity. These units could be put in there and power whole communities.
You really have to take a look at each individual component and function. And when you step back, you say, wow, this thing works. There's too much for it. There's too many facets involved not to be something viable.
I felt that the big generators at the power station were a waste of money, would present to us vast pollution problems in the future. So the whole idea was to get something simple, not difficult to produce, and produce electricity.
With a series of coils attached to it, you can supply a home or an automobile or any device you want that runs on electricity at any voltage or power that you require. This particular device actually emits electrons. It does so through an exchange from a rare earth to lighter elements as it goes out. It's also amplified, and as it comes out, you have a tremendous abundance of electrons which are actually pumping into the coils instead of just bumping them forward a notch as a conventional generator would do. The primary component is a rare earth, and it can be, although it can be any of the rare earths, the component that we use is neodymium. That's element number 60 on the periodic chart. And that unit puts out an excess of electrons for some reason, and it will also replenish them very easily.
While I've been playing with this, with equipment, I've uncovered a lot of things which I suspected but couldn't prove. Clearly, the magnetic field was completely different to the magnetic fields we knew of. We got fields at right angles. That's why the whole thing moves. If you haven't got two fields, it won't move.
As the rollers move, they provoke electrons to migrate from the neodymium to the various layers.
So we know that the magnetic field can be set to perform functions.
The electron flow is accelerated to an extremely high rate, and it creates a vacuum around the device. And in that vacuum, you develop numbing cold. And numbing cold, as we know today, is a function of superconductivity. It also, which has not been known, a function of gravitational force.
The three-seater craft, which we've been asked to do, it will be a 90-foot diameter vehicle. Here we had something we couldn't understand. It wasn't doing what I wanted. That's what a generator wanted.
It will dive down in temperature at one point if you build it correctly and actually levitate and actually lift off the Earth, developing its own gravitational field.
This thing wanted to fly. So to me then, the easiest thing was to work on a body. Let it fly. And we toyed with this down in Warminster, where we built these, what was labelled UFOs. We called them levity discs, but we built this. Now, 13 old-age men backed that project, and they only backed me on the following condition, that I did not go commercial with this. They didn't want any problems with taxman. They were doing this for fun. But to me, that was all right. That was giving me a chance to experiment.
We have had at least 41 flight vehicles to date. Yes, they've been tested, and the offer we're now making, we are guaranteeing will fly.
It will weigh roughly 90 tons on completing. And made it quite clear to them it was not a UFO. The government knows It's identified, they know what it is. Every government knows what it is. They've known it for years. Here, behind me, you see an illustration of something similar to the effects that are happening around the SEARL effect generator. This energy is all around us. It is like this battery. We have electrons pulled to one end so that we can make them flow in a particular manner. If we take a plate and we make our roller like the battery, but just slightly different, that it takes this energy into this, it will then rotate around this plate. Not only rotate around the plate, it also rotates around its own axis. This was made for the Washington Conference of Future Energy in Washington, D.C. a few years back. It had no intention of anything moving. That wasn't intended. All we wanted to prove that the scientists were wrong. You could get 12 magnetic units to stick on that ring and they would not fall off. We have a plain board here. We got a plate with no power whatsoever. We have a copper outer surface. What we need to do, we got to somehow get power from here to here. First of all, we need rollers. And we'd like the lady to examine for any secret batteries in them.
No batteries.
No batteries?
Nothing but...
Just a lump of metal. What we could do is ask the lady to put the roller units back in. 2, not flying off yet. 3, no flying off. 4, no excitement yet. 10, 11, and the 12th disciple just going in. No launching has taken place. Scientists must be wrong. Now we need to get some voltage across here to find out how much power will it take to make them move and if they will fly off. We've now got some voltage available. So the lady kindly try to move, see if one will move. Ready for the launching. We're getting there, we're nearly there. And we give it a little bit more push. And we're away, look at them. You see them shooting off everywhere. Where are they going? Nobody knows. Are they going to heaven or are they going to hell? Those exclusive rollers there. Good God, they're coming, they're breathing faster than we're losing them. How about that? Oh, let's see how many we left with. Well, stop the door to the park and we'll see. There's nothing. That's a fast breather. We've still got 12 rollers. How's that? The question here is, there's no power on here. But power must come across there to make that roller set. It can't go that way, you're blowing running fuses. If it went that way, it comes from that way to this way. And that means somebody's wrong. Now, either I'm hallucinating. If I am, I don't know what I've had. I'm not on drugs, and I'm sure the lady's not on drugs, and I'm sure our engineer's not. What we see is motion of metal, and they keep going as long as we can draw power across from that plate to that connecting unit here. So, FB and friends, take note. We are happy that you've given us this welcome on the internet, making people look at us, which we are unable to do. My blessing with you, son. Keep it up. There's nothing like it. We are here. Now we'd like to show another interesting effect. Why do we use copper? And you don't know. I'm going to tell you why.
JohnSearleStory.com. JohnSearleStory.com. You can download the video or purchase the DVD. Came out in early 2009 from Bradley Lockerman Films, Los Angeles, California. First of all, this last minute, I want to take a minute to thank the GlobalBEM for hosting SEARL Technologies again. At the first GlobalBEM, or I lectured in Holland last year, we were able to find an investor that invested significant monies in the R&D effort to reproduce the SEARL effect generator, and because of that, we're having our best year ever. So if you have a technology company, thank you. Yeah, right on. Power to the people indeed. If you have an energy company, you have an invention, this is the place to be. GlobalBEM. You can get funding. I want to thank all our STI, SEARL Technology Incorporated affiliates all over the world. I want to thank, of course, my boss, our friend, Professor John Searle, who's 82 years old, working very hard in England right now. And take the last 30 seconds to do a little audience participation, to have a little fun. Would you like to have cheap, clean energy?
Yeah.
I can't hear you. Yeah. That's more like it. Would you like to have warp-driven starships? I can't hear you. Well, we can have that. Talk to Mr. Bradley Lockerman. Talk to me. Talk to any of Team SEARL. We can make a prosperous and wonderful present and future. The SEG and the inverse gravity vehicle, also by John Searle, are here right now. I'm Russell Anderson from SEARL Technologies Incorporated, soon to be moving to Southern California so I can work on this full time. It's already here. That's how you manifest. It's already here. You must believe that in your heart and soul. That's the manifestation. That's how the universe works.
Thank you so much, Russell. And he didn't know what was going on. Back there, we've been running around, scurrying around with 3 different computers, trying to get John Searle on for just a moment so we could all show him our deep appreciation. But I think it's about 1 in the morning. He's probably snoozing and not noticing what's popping up on Skype. But we gave it a try. We weren't able to pull it off, though. But thank you so much for sharing this incredible body of his life's work. Unbelievable. Thank you.